So.
All right. Okay. My name's Tim, the Bible Thumping Wingnut, and you're listening to a Google Hangout. This Google Hangout is live today, November 9th, 2014, on the BiblethumpingWingnut.com YouTube channel, and also reposted on our podcast feed. So actually quite a number more of you listen on the podcast feed than on the Google Hangout. So we appreciate your interest in listening. Once again, Matt Slick from carm.org is here, and we're going to talk, and we don't have any specific guest lined up, so we're going to be posting the link to join this discussion in the description box, not in the description box, but in the comment feed. And if you do come in, I hope you come prepared with a question for Matt Slick. How are you, Matt?
Hey, I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm well. I got rid of. I had to buy a new computer this week, so we're
Really?
starting all over again.
Well, that's okay. I like new computers.
I do too, but then you got to set everything up again and again.
Yeah, well, I can tell you tricks on how to make it better, faster, easier, but that's another show.
Let me post the link in the description, or excuse me, in the comment feed, and then get started. How did you? How did you think your discussion went last week with Scott Clifton?
Well, I thought Scott, he's a gentleman. He's nice, he's polite, he's intelligent, but I thought, this is my perception, I thought he was ducking and weaving in that he was trying to not get caught. And so, in my opinion, I'm not trying to speak badly about the guy, but if he was here, I'd say the same thing, that his definitions seemed to not be nailed down. They seemed to kind of flow with the situation or the topic at hand. So if we're going to have another encounter, I would suggest that what we do is actually have a very specified definition list go, and modified if we have to, so that we can know what we're talking about. But I don't think he was able to answer the objections and the issues of objective morality very well at all. That's just my opinion.
Well, definitely not. I mean, I noticed that once you finally got it, well, again, I think he was a good debater. He was a good debater. He had a tactic that I hadn't seen before. It was very clever.
What?
And I don't even think that he uses it as consciously, but when things don't go his way and you say something that makes him look less than good, he would respond with, "Oh, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Good. Now we're getting somewhere." And then he wouldn't respond to what you said. He would go in another direction. It was really good. It was really slick of him to do that. Slick, there you go. It was very slick of him to do that.
I can only use that word. Nobody else can. And my wife, but that's about it.
And when you really, really cornered him, then like most non-believers, professing atheists, they'll say, well, that all depends on your definition of morality or your definition of good or whatever.
Well, before we get on the air here, I introduced you to Kylie. She's sitting to my right. She's an actual atheist, and she's nice, and she actually watched that interchange that we had last week. We could ask her what she thinks.
Sure.
You want me to put you on the spot? Yeah. Okay. Let me get this thing up here, right here, and I may have to give her the mic to do that, because I'm trying to get the camera mic, for some reason, doesn't want to work, but that's okay. So let's see what we got here. Okay, so I'll put the camera on her. You can see more of my office this way too, which is a bit of a mess. There she is right there. So what do you think?
Well, can you hear me? We're good?
Yeah. Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, I thought it was, I told Matt, I thought the whole thing was very interesting, because I had seen some of the discussions from Matt's side, obviously, and then I've also watched quite a few videos of Scott's, and I thought that he did course, coming from my perspective, I was kind of rooting for the atheist team, but I thought that there were good points made on both sides, and I saw a couple places where I felt like it was one or the other squirming a little bit in the way that things were worded. I definitely thought that I think the example that Matt gave about the woman in the coma, that seemed to be a little bit tough for Scott to answer at that point, and so I thought that was a pretty good, seemed to trap him a little bit. But I think that the overall the discussion was good. I thought I got a lot out of it in terms of the importance of defining before you start a debate or before you start an interchange of defining what terms mean, because it seemed like there was a lot of time spent just defining things, which could have maybe been spent more on the arguments. But I think that was just a result of not having maybe had specific parameters, so maybe the next time if they interact, then they could have some of that stuff beforehand. But I thought it was a good interaction. I mean, I couldn't say that one person won or the other, but obviously coming from my perspective, I felt like I don't feel like it was a slam dunk on Matt's part, but but it wasn't really the other way either. So I thought it was a good interchange, really. So I don't know if that's much of an opinion other than it was good.
What did you think was the weakest point in Matt's position?
Well, I think that the weakest point in that position, to me, and to I think a lot of atheists, is that the claim of there being an objective morality, but then that morality is not necessarily applied objectively or consistently to God, in terms of, okay, God says don't murder, God says don't lie, God says these things, and that's supposed to be consistent with God's nature, but then we see things in the Bible that, at least from my opinion, don't line up with that nature. So that, to me, I think is a weak point in the, and I'm sure Matt would have an explanation for that, of how exactly that works or why it's not necessarily the same thing, but that to me is the weakest point. Of course, and I'm not like a hardcore long-term atheist, so I'm sure there's people that watching that would be like, she's totally wrong, she doesn't know what she's talking about, and that's probably true. So I mean, I'm just talking from my perspective. I wouldn't be representing anybody but me. So
Yeah. Well, my question for you would be about what moral standard do you judge the acts of God?
Oh, well, that's a good question, and that's one Matt and I have been kind of talking about, that where I see some holes in the whole argument of. But to me, and this is what Matt and I were talking about just before we came on here, is that to me it comes back to, when you boil it down to, or come back to the end of both agreements, both an atheist and a theistic point of view, that it comes back to neither of you know. You have to both say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. A theist has to say, I don't know why or how God does the things that he does, or I can't explain God. And then oftentimes they're harpooned because they say, oh, I don't know, and then, atheists will get on them for that. But then if you come down to, at the bottom, for an atheist who would say, maybe the universe is infinite, or maybe one of those explanations, and they say, well, how does that make sense? And you have to say, I don't know, and then they get, kind of bagged on for that. So to me, it comes back to basically that everybody's in the same position. We don't know. We don't have an explanation. Matt's shaking his head that that's not true. And I'm sure there could be other atheists out there that are saying, again, that I don't know what I'm talking about. But that, to me, is kind of that it comes down to nobody really knows. These are all the explanations that we come up with that seem to make sense to us for whatever reason. One argument makes sense to one person, but you can break it down step by step and supposedly show them exactly where they're wrong, but it still doesn't make sense to them because of whatever they have in their own head. So I don't know if that makes sense.
They're called presuppositions.
Right, exactly. And I do know a little bit about presuppositional apologetics, and so but yeah, I do get that, why that is more of a go-to tactic for apologists, because it just kind of skirts the whole issue of, and gets down to the presupposition part, which is kind of hard to argue with. So I get that. But yeah. I'll give it back to Matt because I'm not very good at this.
No, you did fine. You did fine. I just wasn't sure. She did fine. I did.
Yeah, she did fine.
I know she's not here to debate, so.
No, we're having, we were talking about this before. Are the Christians and the atheists in the same position? In some senses, yes. In some senses, no. We're in the same position that both of us are going to have a problem explaining everything. We can't. There's certain places where we're just going to come and say, well, I don't know. But at least the Christian can posit God's existence. And this is what the topic is about, atheism versus theism. So if the atheist can't posit certain things, and our explanation is God, and God has an explanatory power that goes beyond their ability, well, then it supports the idea of God. If they say, well, then God, where did God come from? Well, that's another topic, because we're talking about God exists or doesn't exist, not where he come from, but if he exists, well, then you better answer to him, because he's bigger than you are. And he can say to the hell. I mean, we get into the gross kind of practicality about the whole thing. So since the issue is God or versus no God, and the theistic argument has explanatory power where the atheist one does not, for example, in rationality, morality, our existence, well then why would anybody want to hold to something that they cannot have explanatory power in those things where the theistic one does? So what I see is, no offense meant, Kylie, but what I see a lot of atheists do is they'll recognize that difficulty and then they try and justify staying in that position by saying, but you can't explain where God came from. But what's that got to do with whether or not he exists or not? Because the atheists will often say to me, well, I don't have to explain, and one just did 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago, I don't have to explain where logic came from, because I just use it and I know it's there. Well, okay, but if someone says to me, well, then where'd God come from? And I say, I don't know. Well, see, then you can't use God as an example of anything. What? It just doesn't make any sense. The issue is that, is there a God or is there not a God? If we want to talk about potential versus actual infinities, about the infinite regression of uncaused causes and the nature of God, we could try that. That presupposes his existence. But when we're discussing atheism versus theism, and atheism does not have the ability to account for rationality, objective morality, and our existence, then why should it be retained? It just shouldn't be. That's the logic of it.
Right.
That's the argument anyway.
Yeah. And someday, not today, I really want to take you through matter could not have always existed. The universe could. One day I want to take you through. I want to allow you to go through that whole presentation that you had, because it's really good. But right now we have another caller.
Sure.
David is here. Hello. David,
hello,
how are you? How are you? What brings you here today?
I have been wanting to debate. I
love
debating on this sort of topic.
How did you know about this hangout? Are you on YouTube?
Yeah, I've been sort of around YouTube for a couple of months now. So I found your channel and I saw a couple of the debates on here. I found it through King Crocoduck when he was on this channel.
Oh, good.
And yeah, so I've been looking at how Matt debates and just sort of trying to work out where our positions are on these issues.
Okay, before we get started, let me tell everybody who's watching that if you want to come in and be next to engage with Matt, just click on the link. It's right there. Anybody can join. When you do get in here right away, you won't be in the broadcast, but you'll be able to see what's going on, and we'll add you when it's your turn. So, all right, Dave. Matt's here.
Hey, Dave, how you doing, buddy? Dave, are you an atheist?
Hello. Yes, I am.
Strong atheist or weak atheist?
I have very little confidence in the claim that God does not exist, so I stay as a weak atheist, preferably.
Okay.
It really depends on the God. So a God that's, say, omnipotent, like truly omnipotent, sort of can create a boulder that he can't lift. That sort of argument. That definition of omnipotence I can't really believe in, but there are other gods that I could that I can say I can't say don't exist, but I can say I don't evidence for their existence.
Well, we can, I agree with you
So,
that no gods exist,
okay,
of course, except for the Christian one. So, but what's your question?
okay. So, well, the Christian. Okay, so what is your best argument for God's existence? Let's go with that.
Well, he said he exists, so I believe him.
Have you got one, or is it? Okay,
Well,
he said
he's
he
got lots,
exists.
but
How do you know that?
my best one is that he says so. Now, because when I face him on Judgment Day, I'm going to go with his argument. He says he exists, so that's good enough for me. That's the best. That may not be satisfactory to you, but if you want me to argue a different way, I can.
Okay, so what's this thing about presuppositions then? Because I'm still not 100% sure. It seems like you're trying to psychoanalyze atheists, but you get it a little bit wrong.
Could you explain what you mean by that? Because actually, your hat kind of tells me that you got some issues. And
oh, no, it's just my headphones. I can't find my other ones, so this is actually just built-in earphones.
You didn't get it. You said I'm trying to psychoanalyze. I stepped right into doing that on you. Oh man, I set you up.
Oh.
See, Kylie here, she got it. She laughed right away because she's obviously a lot smarter.
Fair enough.
All right.
No,
okay,
I'm just autistic. I don't get that sort of stuff.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm just having fun with it.
Okay. Yeah. So.
Presuppositions.
So
right.
I looked on Calm and.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So you say so I saw on Calm your little I wasn't sure if that was your argument or that was someone else writing that, but it was saying about so what evidence would you need for God to exist?
Yeah, I was writing that.
And yeah, and I think I would say it really depends on the definition of the God, because different characteristics from different people from different sects of the same religion.
Well, which God do you want to pick?
So it's difficult to ask what evidence. Well, your God. Yeah, your God.
Okay.
Exactly, your one.
God.
The God that you believe in.
Yeah, the Christian God. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the Christian God.
Yeah,
so
yeah, okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so he says he exists, and how do you know he says that?
Because he revealed it to me in the Bible.
Okay, in the Bible. And
yeah.
Why do you believe that the Bible is true?
Because he said so.
Isn't that kind of circular?
Yes.
And that's not an issue here?
You're presupposing logic, right? You're presupposing logic, aren't you?
Ah, okay.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on. Hold on. Wait. Wait a minute. You're presupposing logic. If I were to ask you, why would you do that? You'd give me a logical argument. Isn't that circular? And you have to say yes. We all have circularity.
No.
We all have presuppositions. The question is,
that's not circular.
The question, yes, it is circular. Yes, it is circular. You can't use logic to prove logic without begging the question, without previously assuming its validity. It's circular. Everybody has circular arguments.
I think you're oversimplifying the position. Okay,
of what?
For example, if I move my arm like this, if I move my arm like that, yeah, can you see in the camera?
Yeah.
I move my arm, yeah? I'm moving my arm with my arm, but that's not a circle, is it? It's I'm using a different part of my arm to move another part of my arm. So I'm using a different part of logic to argue logic. Logical statements.
What's an arm? You have to presuppose a law of identity in order to say that.
Okay, well, the law of identity is only so
Look, you're not going to win this.
To things.
Go on. Look, what you're doing is presupposing certain things. I do this with atheists all the time. They'll say, "Look, I'm going to refute you." Well, go ahead. You're going to build a building with bricks. Go get your own bricks. You see, if you're going to use logic to make a statement, you're presupposing what an arm is. You're presupposing the universality, the law of identity.
No, I'm just calling this an arm. I'm not presupposing what an arm is, because I see words as descriptive, not prescriptive.
Oh, so it's arbitrary.
Yeah, it's completely arbitrary. You can add any arbitrary combination of
Okay.
sounds
I'm
that your
glad.
mouth makes
I'm glad then. I'm
to
glad that you think
refer
I'm
to something.
correct. I'm so glad you think I'm correct and you're not.
Yeah.
Thank you. I win.
Oh no.
Yeah.
How did I just?
I'm just
Such a
being
bad
I didn't
arbitrary.
friend.
just refute
Such a
myself or anything.
bad. Yeah,
I'm
you
just
did. You just.
No, I just referred to some.
terrible-
I just said
terrible argument.
the word I used for something was arbitrary.
David, I get to be arbitrary if you get to be arbitrary.
No.
No? Oh, absolutely. I don't get to be arbitrary
No,
now.
I was talking about the. I was just talking about why it's called an arm, not that it was arbitrary. That it is an arm.
But you said I can't be arbitrary.
What? I think you must have misread what I said.
No, I'm having fun with
I
your
thought-
words. What I'm doing this on purpose. I'm having
I
fun
think
with your
you're-
words. Okay, let's get back.
Yeah, okay. I said that the word arm, referring to this object here, is arbitrary. Yeah. Not
The sound
that
is,
the
yeah, the sound
that
is,
logic
yes,
itself is arbitrary
yes.
or anything.
Yeah, but the logic behind it is
Yeah,
not.
the sound, the use of the sound. Yeah, okay. I think we're on the same page now. Don't troll me again, please.
Here, let's
Okay,
work
so
this.
why
hold on,
is
wait.
God needed for this?
No. Okay, hold on one sec. Are you there?
Okay.
Okay. You asked about
Yep.
presuppositions. Now, what I'll often do with
Still here.
atheists is if they want to make an argument, what they're doing is presupposing the validity of logical laws in order to do that. Now, if you want to talk about the evidence for God and the argument for God's existence, well, you are actually supporting the idea of God's existence by your own speech and your own actions. So you're using logic. You certainly have the right to be logical.
Well, that assumes that logic can only exist with God.
I didn't make any assumptions yet.
You're assuming that God is the only explanation for logic.
Did I make any assumptions yet?
Well, yeah, you did, because you said that atheists prove God's existence by using logic, which comes
I didn't
upon the assumption.
I didn't say only, did I?
Well, okay. So you're saying it is the explanation then? It's the valid explanation. It's the true explanation. But you must have assumed there, because you said that the fact that we use logic is proving God's existence.
Okay. I'm being precise on purpose. All right, and you're not yet. Trying to get you to be more precise in what you're talking about. But I do want you to understand something. That what you're doing is presupposing that there are statements, there are truths, and there are things you recognize. You can only do that if the laws of logic are in place.
Okay. Well, you're assuming they're these actual things. Is that the case? That you think they're like actual entities, or do you think that they're just descriptive things about how statements and things behave?
If they're descriptive, they have to presuppose the laws in order to describe. So that's circular. It doesn't work as tautologist and self-refuting.
No.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. All abstract logic is tautology.
Hold on. You can't have a statement without presupposing certain logical truths in order to have a statement be valid. So you can't make a statement and say it doesn't depend on anything logical, then everything's arbitrary and blue sleeps faster than Wednesday. It makes no sense at that point. So you can't do that. Okay, it just does not work. So now the laws of logic exist. If you say, are they entities? Well, it depends what you mean by entity, and I don't mean that to be playing a game, because it has certain
that's fine.
It has certain philosophical meaning. But let me just help you out. Do the laws of logic have existence? Yeah. They're conceptual things.
Okay. Yeah, they're conceptual.
So let me ask you.
Yeah, I'll agree with that one.
Can you have a concept without a mind? Can you have a concept without a mind?
No.
Good,
okay,
I would agree.
No. That's
By
true.
definition, a concept requires a mind. So the laws of logic are conceptual.
Yep.
Okay. They're also universal. They don't depend on you for their validity. They don't depend on me for their validity. They're independent of us.
Okay, they don't. No, that's true.
That's correct. No, they don't. They're not
Yep.
properties of the universe because, like this coffee cup I got here, a property, hardness and weight and mass, properties are measurable, but you can't measure the laws of logic, can you?
No. Okay. Yep.
Okay.
I'll agree.
So if they're not measurable, they're not properties of the universe, then they're independent of the universe.
No.
No?
They aren't necessarily properties of the universe. They're just the way that true statements behave.
Oh, so true statements behave this way.
Yeah.
So true statements have behavior?
In a sense, yeah.
They do?
True statements
so
can
2
only
plus
be
2
in
is
a certain
4.
way.
2 plus 2 is 4. It's a true statement. So what's its behavior?
No, I don't think that's what I meant. I don't think that they. I was referring in the sense that true statements can only follow certain rules, so they only follow the law. They have to follow the laws of logic. That's how they behave. They follow the laws
Very
of
good,
logic.
very good. True statements have to be in agreement with the laws of logic. Good. The laws of logic themselves
Yeah.
are conceptual things, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The laws of logic are not dependent upon your mind or my mind, not our minds. The laws of logic are not dependent upon the universe because they're not properties of the universe.
Okay. Yeah.
The laws of logic are also transcendent because they're not dependent upon the universe, so they transcend the universe.
No.
They don't transcend the universe? They're dependent upon the universe or not
They're
dependent?
I mean, they do require a mind to exist because true statements don't exist without a mind.
Good.
Yeah?
But they're not
But they
dependent.
don't necessarily.
The laws of logic are not properties of the universe, so therefore they're not dependent upon the universe. Because the universe is not a mind.
No. Okay. Yep.
Therefore,
Yeah,
the laws of logic
it
depend
has
upon a
minds in
mind.
it, but
The laws of logic depend upon a mind.
no.
No?
No, they don't depend upon a mind.
Oh,
No.
they don't.
They depend upon. No, they depend. They have been created by a mind.
Oh.
Yeah, they have many minds by
They do.
by philosophers and things. Yeah, by
And how's
philosophers and
that work?
stuff.
So which minds created logic?
I
The
think
laws of
Aristotle was the first guy who started. Yeah,
So the
I think,
laws of
well,
logic were created by
yeah.
Aristotle?
In a sense, yeah, because in the same way that scientific laws are in a sense created, is that we find ways that things behave. Like for example, gravity. Yeah, gravity. We haven't created the law of gravity. We haven't created that. We
But
have
the law of
found
gravity.
the way that matter is attracted to other matter.
But gravity is a property of the universe.
Yeah, no, I'm using this as an analogy. It doesn't have to be exactly the same.
But the laws of logic are not properties of the universe. They're completely
They're
different
properties of
categories.
statements. They're abstracts. They're merely abstracts. They don't need to be properties of the universe itself because it could be in another universe. Yeah.
So the laws of logic
fair?
are abstractions. They're conceptual.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're conceptual.
And you're equating it with the law of gravity.
No, I wasn't equating it with the law of gravity. I was just I was just saying that's the same way that we consider the law of gravity. We should treat the laws of logic the same way.
So gravity existed. Gravity existed, and then so and so, whoever it was, wrote down the formula for gravity, whatever it is, so that the law of gravity was now written down on a piece of paper. Okay?
Yep.
Right?
And that's the law of gravity. Gravity itself, it did exist before that.
Okay. So gravity existed, right? Okay. The laws of logic, we write them down, right? So did the laws of logic have pre-existence to when we wrote them down?
Yes. But the laws themselves.
Okay.
So the ones we are talking about, like the law of identity and the law of non-contradiction.
But you said that the laws of logic are conceptual.
No, they apply, but we can only really call them those laws as soon as we've actually derived them. In the same way that the law of gravity didn't. It did exist before then, but we can only really say that we can only really like use it or apply it or say it actually exists when we
So the
derive it.
conceptual laws existed before we conceptualized them? Watch.
In a sense, yeah. They did exist. They did work, but we've only called them the laws.
Well, but they work. They can only work if there's a mind working them.
I'm still not sure where this is leading.
I'm trying to
Okay,
get you to
so you're
the
going to say that
logical end
God's
of your
mind is the thing that
the
creates them.
logical end of your position leads to absurdity. I'm trying to bring you to that end. That's where you said, where's it going to end? I'm going to end. The goal is to show you that your position doesn't work. I'm trying to do it step by step off what you say. You say these laws exist, but laws, the conceptual things require a mind, which you admitted earlier. But if the mind are codified,
Yeah, but they're only descriptive laws.
But if their description, you presuppose the laws of logic.
No, you don't.
Yes.
You only have to. No, because they're not things that you have to presuppose. They're just things that happen to exist.
Okay. Now this is where the atheist mind, no offense, falls short. You're at the roadblock. You can't go any further. You have to say they're descriptive of things.
Yeah.
But in order for them to be descriptive, you have to presuppose the laws themselves in order for the descriptions to have validity. You're circular.
Well, yeah, but you'd have to presuppose the laws of logic to refer to anything.
But you don't understand. You don't understand. Here's the thing.
To speak about anything with truth claims.
Exactly. So where do these laws come from?
In the same way that if God created them, for example, if God created them,
He did not
or if they're
create
the product of God.
He did not create them.
Okay, are they the product of God then?
No.
The product of God's mind, or are they? How does God create them? Can I ask then? Let's hear your view.
I don't say He created them. He simply revealed them out of His character, out of His mind. They're just simply the revelation of His character.
But that presupposes logic.
No, it presupposes God.
For them to be revelation.
It presupposes God. The question was about where does the logic itself come from. I said God is a necessary precondition for those laws.
Why?
Because without Him, you can't have the laws of logic be explained.
Just because you can't explain them, it means they're not true then? It means that they can't exist.
I didn't say that. I said that the atheist worldview, that's what I'm saying, the atheist worldview cannot account for them. The Christian one can. If you have a worldview that can't explain something, why do you believe it? If you have another worldview that can explain it, why not believe that? It's like this. You believe in the theory of evolution.
Because that's an argument from ignorance.
No, it's not.
Okay, yeah.
You believe in evolution,
It
right?
was. You can't explain this. I can. I can. I have a placeholder for this, and you don't.
Look, let me explain something. We have fossils in the ground. So I can offer you the theory of evolution, or I can offer you the fossil fairy, put them there. Okay? Which one has more explanatory power?
Yeah.
Which one has more explanatory power?
I would say the theory of evolution, but that's not why. That's not why we accept the theory of evolution. We accept that because it also predicts new data.
It's an illustration.
I don't care about the explanatory power of anything. Yeah, I know, but I'm explaining why your analogy doesn't really work, because I don't agree with anything that.
You don't care about.
I don't care about the explanatory power
of anything.
No.
Of anything.
Okay. Well.
No. Yeah. I only care about the truth of a claim.
Wait a minute. If you don't care about the explanatory power of anything, you can't care about the truth.
Thank you very much.
Unless, okay, so... Hello?
Next.
Yeah. What you did, you just refuted yourself in your argument. See, the atheist position ultimately can only argue in circles.
I'm not 100% sure about that.
I am.
Well, who cares at this point? You don't care about the explanatory power of anything.
So why are you trying to explain anything?
Come on, David.
No,
Hold on.
because I'm...
Hold on.
Okay, okay.
Hey,
What I
David?
meant by I don't care whether the explanatory power of two explanations. Oh, hello.
Hey, David. I was just gonna say I'm with you, man. I get what you're saying. You're not the only one.
Yeah.
I understand what you were saying about the laws being descriptive. In the laws, the description of the laws didn't exist until we named them and we created them. But
Yeah.
the behavior
Because
that they're describing was there. Is that what you were trying to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're rules for language. So before language, there weren't any laws of logic because there weren't any laws of logic to apply to the language. But they're in a hypothetical other universe, they would still exist. With other language, if there was another sentient being with other language. But that was what I was trying to explain. But it's kind of sometimes difficult.
Right. I was just wanted to say I get what I'm not necessarily tracking with everything, but I get what you were saying. So anyway, I'll give it back to you.
Yeah, I understand.
Well, hold on a sec. We got a problem here. The laws of logic describe behavior. That's one of the statements.
Yeah.
The way that the world acts, I guess it is.
It describes the way the world acts, right? Okay. Okay. So then, the laws of logic describe the way the world acts. Okay. So if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. Can you describe that occurrence in the world? Where does that happen in the world? My backyard? Mount Everest? At the mall?
Well, this is why I consider it abstract rules for language.
Okay, let's try it again. Let's try it again.
It's you can put like logic is like a mathematical in the same way as a mathematical formula.
That presupposes the laws of logic in order to have mathematical formula, and numbers do represent actuality.
No, I said that it's the same way.
No.
I meant in the same way. I wasn't saying.
If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. That's a behavior. You're describing a behavior. That's the proper law, proper inference.
Yep.
How is it that you're observing that? Where's the behavior of that in the universe?
It's not because it's abstract. But you could again, it's rules for language. So if
so is German logic different than Spanish logic?
So obviously, if you only in the sense of you have to use different words and like different sentence structures, but the laws of logic themselves
then the laws of logic are independent
to every language.
Then you would say that the laws of logic
of the specific language.
The laws of logic are independent of any particular language.
Yes, they are independent of any particular language, but they're rules for every language.
Okay, so describe the behavior that you observe in the universe at if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C.
Okay. Well, you would just use placeholders, right? You would just substitute statements in, right? Objects.
That is a statement.
So if
it's self.
So okay, if I'm a person and a person is a mammal, then I'm a mammal.
It's a syllogism. You're presupposing deductive logic in order to argue.
Okay. So why do you think
He said you're describing what you see, but here's a mistake that's being made. You don't realize that what you're doing is you're presupposing this in order to make a descriptive conclusion. You're saying, it's called conflation. You're saying, I see a behavior, the logic is the same as the behavior. You're saying, I see a behavior in the real world, but you don't realize that what you're actually doing is presupposing the validity of the statement and imposing it upon a behavior. You're not drawing it out of it because you can't do that on its own without logic there first. You can't say, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. I observe that in nature without presupposing that law to begin with. The law is not dependent upon your minds for its validity, because what you're saying is, I see the behavior. You're saying it's dependent upon my mind for its behavior because of its validity, because I'm observing it. It obtains its truth value by my observation, but that's not the case. That would mean then that whatever you observe or someone else observes contrary to you becomes true. But that can't be true because minds contradict each other. What you guys are doing, is you don't realize it is, you are presupposing the laws of the logic in order to make the statements. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. You can't prove that from anything other than just assuming its own validity. It is a law of logic, but you don't find it under a rock. You don't observe that. You don't observe that law. The law itself is of the mind. If you could say you're observing it between two rocks, you don't observe it. You don't observe if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. It's a logical truth. Don't make the mistake of saying, let me reduce it to more simple terms. An apple is an apple. That's a law of identity. Something is what it is, it is not what it is not. But it's a mind that makes the conclusion and makes a statement. It's a mind that does it. Let's say, Dave, that your mind is the one that concludes this. Is that law of logic dependent upon your mind for its truth? The answer is no.
What do you mean
the law of logic is not dependent upon your mind for its truth. Then how is it that it is true? If it's not dependent upon your mind for its truth, then there's something other than your mind you're appealing to for its truth. Because truth requires a mind.
Okay.
Truth is a statement.
I would say in the same way that...
Truth is a statement. 2 plus 2 is 4. It's a statement. The statement has to have a mind behind it. So if something is what it is, a mind has to be involved because it's a truth statement. So she says, talking about the statement, no one's describing. But the statement describes something. Okay? But in order to make a statement, you have to presuppose the laws of logic. Because if I say an apple is an apple, I'm presupposing the validity of the law of identity to recognize what an apple is in the first place.
Well, no, you're not. You're just using a word to refer to that object.
It doesn't matter what word.
You have to use the law of identity to make sure that you refer to it consistently.
The law of identity is not dependent upon your mind.
You don't have to presuppose.
You're imposing a statement. You're imposing.
I never said that.
You're imposing a statement upon an object. You're presupposing the universality of identity and continuity and abstraction upon a physical object. And then you're saying this is a law of identity, but you don't realize that what you have to do is presuppose the consistency of the law in order to validate the law, and it's circular. This is as far as you can go as an atheist, circular reasoning. We can go beyond that. We can say that God is the universal mind by which we recognize the truth of those laws that we can then impose upon an object and say, there you go. Now you can say, well, then where'd God come from? Now we get into the circularity of where God came from. But at least we have God as a necessary precondition for the laws of logic, where an atheist cannot have any precondition.
Well, you're assuming
it doesn't have explanatory power.
Is the precondition. Well, why is God the precondition?
You don't see it, do you?
You said
Kylie doesn't agree.
About how God just reveals his character.
Yeah. Because what happens is, I've noticed with atheists, no disrespect meant, but I've noticed that what they do is they presuppose the thing they're trying to prove. When we do it with God, they complain. But the point is that we're discussing whether God exists or not.
No, I think the
and
reason
yes, we do presuppose God exists. So we do argue from that perspective. But when we do that, at least we have explanatory power. But when we presuppose that God does not exist, we don't have explanatory power.
That's not a problem for David because he doesn't care about explanatory power for anything.
That is right. And that's a problem because he shoots himself in the foot.
I don't care if
Dave, what you should do is say you retract that statement.
Okay, what I meant about explanatory power, let me just have a caveat here. What I meant about explanatory power is if I'm given two explanations and one has better explanatory power than the other, I don't care about that. I care about the evidence for one or the other. That was what I meant. I didn't necessarily.
How is the evidence not the explanatory power?
Explanatory power is of evidence. You had to have a theory that puts the evidence together. And what's the evidence that we're talking about?
Okay.
The laws of logic. The laws of logic are the evidence we're looking at.
Well, no. What I mean is, you can think of an infinite number of explanations for a phenomenon, but it really matters which. Yeah, there's hypothetically, an
Not
infinite
even
number of
hypothetically, I
explanations
can't
for
think of
any
an infinite
phenomenon.
number of things.
Well, even then, it would just be just slightly more detailed versions of each explanation.
Because let me tell you what you're doing as an atheist.
So,
This is what the atheist is doing, is saying, look, we see something in the universe, and all we're doing is applying truth statements to what we see. That's where the laws of logic come, because they're just universally true because they apply to what we see in the physical realm. But then what they're saying is that the laws of logic depend upon the physical realm, which you've already said and admitted earlier can't be the case. You have to, when you say that the universe is a necessary precondition for the laws of logic to exist, that we're only observing things in the universe and making statements about them, what you're doing is saying that the laws of logic are dependent upon the physical universe. It's a behavior characteristic. But all properties in the universe are measurable. All properties are measurable. Yes, they are. All of them are measurable. This is
explain that.
Okay,
Could you expand
properties
on
of the
that one?
universe. Motion is measurable. Mass, measurable. Heat, measurable. Entropy, measurable. Refraction, measurable. Properties. Properties exist because something else exists. So, for example, here's a coffee cup. It's white, has a property of whiteness, has a handle, not that all of them do, and it has a certain ability to volume, and if I were to drop it, it'd break a certain way, you know, etc. Because it exists, it has properties that emanate out of its existence. This is measurable. The reason we know this is because we can sense it, for one thing, we can apply measurable things to it. That's what we're saying here when we say it's a property. If you're saying, though...
Well, yeah, but you wouldn't be... You're assuming that you're using analogies which are of physical properties, not abstract properties.
Aha! What are the properties of abstraction?
They don't have any physical properties.
Then they're not dependent upon the physical realm, are they?
No.
Well, then you can't say that when you look at the physical realm and you see a behavior, that that's where the logic comes from.
Okay, yes, we don't say that's where the logic comes from, and I don't. I say that they... No,
it requires a mind.
Okay, but it doesn't necessarily require God's mind. It can require human minds.
Human minds are different. Your mind is different than mine. We disagree, so which mind is correct?
Which one can more accurately map out reality?
The laws of logic. The one that's correct is the one that properly utilizes the laws of logic. But those laws of logic are independent of our minds. If the laws of logic were dependent on your mind, Dave, may it never happen that it would be, because we'd be in trouble. I'm joking at you here. And it would apply to me as well. Then we'd have a problem, okay? The laws of logic are independent of your mind and my mind.
Okay, yeah.
Because you would be able to know if I was making a mistake in logic by citing those laws. They're not dependent upon my mind for their validity, nor yours. They're not dependent upon the physical universe for their existence, because they're not a property of the universe.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that, we can disagree on certain things, but then we could work together to work out who's the one who has the inconsistent logic.
Okay, would you say this? Let me try this. Always trying to find different ways to say the same thing. Would you say that abstractions are properties of a mind?
No.
No? What are abstractions a property of, then, if they're a property at all? What are they?
How
about the result
of entities?
Would you say abstractions are a result
of a mind? Yeah,
of a mind?
Okay, I'll agree with that one.
How about abstractions are a result of a mind? Okay? Would you say that?
Yeah. Okay. Abstractions are the result of a mind.
So would you say...
Hey, Matt. What was the first... What did he just agree to as the definition, and what was the first suggestion you made?
I don't remember.
You said, are they a property of the mind? He said no. And then he agreed to...
No, I said they're a result of mind.
So they're not a property, but they're a result of the mind?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to go with result for a minute.
In the same way that sounds aren't a property of the brain, aren't the property of a mouth, but they are the result of a mouth moving. In the same way.
Could we say this? Could we say that that bad thoughts reflect a bad mind?
Uh, okay, bad is a bit of an arbitrary word, but okay, yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
I mean it is, but we're just kind of fishing here a little bit. So
Yep, that's fine. Yeah.
how about bad logic reflects bad thinking, which comes from a mind that's not trained? We could say yeah to all that. In other words,
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
thoughts reflect the mind, right?
Yes.
Okay, and
Yeah, okay.
absolute truth statements reflect an absolute mind?
No.
No?
No, because that would mean if any one of us were to make an absolute truth statement that were absolutely true, that would make our
Very
minds
good.
absolute.
Very good. You're correct.
That would be the fallacy of division?
Composition or division. Now, since we know that that's the case, we know that absolute truths are not, that they don't obtain their validity because we think them. They have their validity because they comport with the laws of logic and universality. We're recognizing a universal truth, which is what we're doing when we recognize the laws of logic. We're recognizing universal abstractions that already exist. Where do universal abstractions come from? If we recognize them. If they recognize them, they don't come from our minds. We recognize the existence of a universal abstraction.
No, they come from the way that language works.
Okay. That's not true. Because then you have to have a certain laws of language in order for them to have their validity. Then it just doesn't work. We're getting nowhere.
Yeah, we're gonna move on.
He always
comes back to that. No, the problem, David, is you always come back to that language, this language, that, when you get completely exposed. So we're gonna move on, Dave. I mean, it's.
Okay, that's fine.
Thanks for coming on. My goodness, Matt, you're so patient.
I am so nice. I am wonderful. I am such a great guy.
Yeah,
Dave,
you're really nice.
You are so fortunate that I put up with you.
Our next caller.
Yeah.
Our next caller is a believer, I believe.
Okay.
So you have to introduce yourself. Your microphone's working.
Oh, is that me? Oh, hey, hi, Matt.
Hi.
Love your show.
Oh, you're a smart guy. Good for you.
I knew you'd say that.
I'm muted.
Matt, I wanted to know, because I encountered yesterday for the first time a Black Hebrew Israelite, and I wondered if what you knew about this group of the Black Hebrew Israelites and what they believed maybe regarding Jesus or other important doctrines.
Yeah, basically it's a racist thing that the Hebrews were actually black people that came out of some areas of Africa, some say Ethiopia, and that the true color of the Israelites are black people and Jesus was a black guy. And so, which I don't care what color he was, I don't care, but that's their argument. And therefore, along with it comes a bit of a racist thing. And so a lot of black Hebrew Israelites will say white people are possessed of the devil, don't really have souls, and are evil people. That's the oversimplification. Not all of them hold to that because there are variations of black Hebrew Israelites, but that's what a lot of them hold to.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much for answering my question.
That's right. And as I like to say on the radio, Jesus is not the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Caucasian surfer dude. So black Hebrew Israelites could use that against me, I guess.
Matt Yester is next.
Matt's laughing.
Yeah, I turned his microphone on as he was laughing.
Yeah, I was gonna turn it on just to laugh because no one was laughing at that joke. You know,
Hey,
I
Kylie
thought it was kind
laughed.
of funny. You know?
Kylie laughed. She thought it was funny. She's pretty smart.
No one laughed online.
There's some people that I add to the Hangout as soon as they enter, and Matt, you're one person, and Pastor Reverend Hillman added him as soon as he came in too, because I know you guys well. So Matt's been in the room for quite a while. What's up, Matt?
No, it's just I just come in for the chat on the sidebar and stuff like that. I don't really have any formal question or anything like that, so just hanging out. So just in the background. So you didn't have to make me live or anything.
I bet you Bryant has something. We'll see about Bryant. He came in right after you. He's not one of the regulars here.
If something comes up, I'll put it in the chat that I want to ask a question or something. But other than that, I like doing anyone else that's in the chat, just dialing in with them. So.
Okay.
Oh, I just came to listen in.
You just came to listen too.
Yeah, I just came to listen in, really.
Could I ask one more question, maybe?
You just did.
Matt, so when someone gets to the Euthyphro dilemma, and then you answer it based on, you say goodness is based on God's nature, and then they say, well, that just moves the Euthyphro dilemma to God's nature, and then where do you go at that point?
Nowhere.
Okay.
I mean, seriously, it's like saying, well, let's apply the principle to God. You see, if God's going to be saying that there's something outside of himself, which is God, then we're back to the Euthyphro dilemma. The whole thing is, the Euthyphro dilemma is a false dichotomy. God recognizes something that's good, well, that implies something outside of himself that's good. Or he declares that something's good, that implies the arbitrariness. Well, the Euthyphro dilemma is a false dichotomy. Because the third option is, he just reveals out of his own character what it is. Then people say, well, then he could be, that's whatever good is? Yeah. Well, that's convenient. Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, kind of get stuck there, too.
I mean, what are we supposed to do at that point? You know, we were just talking with Kylie a little bit about this, and she's asking the very same thing. And to be honest, at some point, I got to throw the hands up in the air and say, well, yeah, God's good because God's good. But that's circular. Yes, it is.
It's absolute. I mean, the Euthyphro dilemma is the horns is does something become good because God declares it because he says it, or is there an absolute outside of God? Those are the two options, and they're neglecting the third, his very character, which is not one of the two options. So it's not because he says whatever that makes it good. No, it's good because he is good. It's his absolute character, and you know, there's no dilemma after that because it's the third option, and that is the absolute answer for it. Yeah.
It shows that the Euthyphro dilemma is not necessarily the clincher that they like to say it is when it comes to the issue of goodness, because the argument is posed to try and refute the idea of absolute good, trying to show that God is arbitrary or subject to something else. But it misrepresents the Christian position. It's just not a true value. Then they shift the goalpost by saying, oh, then what God says is good, or his character is good, that's just how you define it. That's a different argument altogether than the Euthyphro dilemma.
There's no dilemma after that, really. The question was posed, you know, even once that's stated as the answer, that there's still a dilemma. I don't see a dilemma after that.
Hey Matt.
Yeah.
Matt, what's wrong with saying God created everything? He's the ruler. He's the king. He's the judge. He says what's good. He says what's bad. Who are we to question?
Well, there's truth in it, but God did not create everything. We have evil in the world. God did not create. Now, what I'm going to say is ontological evil. Because it does say in Isaiah 45:7, God created evil, but the evil in the context is calamity and problems in the world, like storms and plagues. Certainly, God does that. But the issue of ontological evil, God does not create. He doesn't create everything. He doesn't create a universe in contradiction to this one. He doesn't create round squares. He doesn't create the universes where he's not God. He doesn't create everything.
Well, I didn't mean to bring up another question in my question. I didn't mean to cause.
No. I'm just saying a lot of people don't realize what they're saying when they say that. But I understand what they're getting at. But I just like to take this thing apart a little bit and then get back to what they're really saying, which I think what they're trying to say is, well, then if he created everything, whatever he says is good is good. But that's the Euthyphro dilemma again. He's just being arbitrary.
Well, let me take that part of the statement away and say, what's wrong with saying that God is God and he rules over all things and he decides what's good and bad, and who are we to question God?
Nothing wrong with that.
I have a question.
This go ahead and introduce yourself because you're first time person on the podcast.
Yeah, hi. I'm a huge fan of you guys. I watch you religiously, especially Matt Slick. I love your debate with Matt Dillahunty. You just totally creamed him. But anyways, I had a question for you regarding free will and free will in heaven. Is there free will in heaven? I'm struggling with this. I can't really figure.
Define free will.
Well, we make choices, right?
Yes.
I mean,
let me help you out. Free will is the ability to make choices that are free according to what you desire, and they're uncoerced. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So if you're in heaven, you can worship God by standing up or worship God by kneeling down. You have free will there? Yes. But you can't sin, let's just say. But then the reason you can't sin is because you're in the presence of incredible holiness. So you don't want to sin because it's just not possible to sin. Would you want to sin? No. Are you free? Absolutely. You're free to sin? Well, there's a yes to it, but you can't because you don't want to. Does that mean you're not free? No more than God, because God can't sin, yet he has free will.
So what happens if somebody does sin in heaven? Or
then
how would that happen?
They are cast out into outer darkness and called the devil, because that's what happened.
Was that what happened to Adam?
No, Adam was never in heaven. He was made on earth in the Garden of Eden. He was good, not perfect. He was good, and he had the ability to freely choose to rebel against God. I'm of the opinion, let me just insert this. My theological opinion is that all sentient creatures will sin unless they're elected not to sin. 1 Timothy 5:21, being the angels elected not to sin. And all people will eventually sin because, this is my opinion, because we don't possess the quality of holiness, which is the inability to sin, and only God possesses that. That's just my opinion.
I have a question.
But the elected ones couldn't because God elected them not to. That's what 1 Timothy 5:21 is. What?
Go ahead, Bryant.
I think that when it says that God created evil, it was the creation of free will that made evil, because there can't be evil unless a person decides or chooses to do evil.
When he says he created evil, let's go to the verse. It's Isaiah 45:7. All right. So let's make sure that we stick to what the Scripture says, and notice the dichotomy, the oppositions. The one forming light and creating darkness, causing well-being and creating calamity. I am the Lord who does all these. The word calamity here is the word ra'ah, which is also used in English as the word evil. And in Hebrew, it's also translated as the word evil. So I'm going to put the word evil in here, because that's what it is in the King James. The one forming light and creating darkness. Light and darkness are opposites, causing well-being and creating evil. If we're to be consistent with what the text is saying, then the well-being and the evil are opposites, the same as light and darkness are opposites. The well-being leads the evil, just as the light leads the darkness. So in other words, light, the opposite of it is darkness. Well-being, the opposite of it is the evil. But we don't speak the term evil like that. We use the word calamity, problems. It's just consistent with what it says. If you're going to say God created evil, it was a creation of free will that made evil possible, well, not to be disrespectful, that's not what the text says. We've got to be careful that we don't impose an idea and a philosophy into something and say, I think it means this, when the text doesn't support that idea. There's too many Christians do this thing. I'm not trying to be mean on you, man. Okay?
Oh, no, I get what you're saying. But if it wasn't for God establishing free will on humans, then would evil even be possible?
Yes, because Satan, you said created free will of humans, but Satan fell before humans were made. That's the theory, anyway.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
There's another theory that says that he fell when Adam and Eve fell, but I don't buy that one.
Matt,
yes?
what do you think about defining evil as a lack or the result of a lack of God's love and God's law in man's heart?
Evil as a result of lack of God's love in man's heart. I think you could make the case for that, because if the lack of God's love is in a man's heart, in other words, there is no love of God in him, then he's left to what he is, and that would be evil. I guess you could make a case like that. But I think that a lot of Christians don't understand, and a lot of unbelievers don't understand. I'm going to use this phraseology carefully, but don't take me literally, because I don't know what other way to say it. But evil it's like a tangible substance you can touch. I'm not saying it's a tangible substance you can touch, but it's like this. In the presence of a demonic force, somehow you're just aware of the evil. It permeates. It's there. It's a sensation. It's terrifying. It's uncomfortable. It's debilitating. It's heavy. And in that sense, I mean tangible, even though that's not the right word. It's experienceable. And there's a type of evil that exists in the demonic realm that when a demonic force manifests itself, you want to get out. You want away from it. Now, this is subjective. A lot of atheists would just reject that because they reject the idea of supernatural. Well, okay. But when we talk about evil biblically, there's more to it than just, hey, they're not loving, and they do a couple bad things. There's actually the sense in which it's a palpable presence, and it is terrifyingly bad. And it emanates out of the devil, so to speak. Just as holiness that emanates out of God's character, when it's upon you, causes you to be aware of your unholiness. It has a strong effect on you. It reduces you, makes you cry, it makes you want to not be in his presence because he's so great and awesome. It's hard to explain. I've experienced both, and let me say this correction. I know I've experienced the latter, the presence of God. I believe I've experienced to a degree the presence of evil in a sense, and be able to sense it and feel it. But so when we say evil, we have many definitions of evil. A plague, a man beating his wife, the presence of the devil. He doesn't even touch you, doesn't do anything, and you're terrified. There's levels of evil and types. So when Isaiah 45:7 talks about evil, creating evil, the context is in the juxtaposition of shalom, or good things, and then the opposite of that is bad things. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. I think, yeah, Lucifer must have a complete lack of any sort of God's love or any of his likeness, I guess, at all.
I think it would be a lack of plus the hatred that goes along. Because a lack of love is just empty, but add to it hatred, intensity, then you have evil, that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not just hatred, but malice, hatred,
pride.
In addition to the lack of love.
Mm-hmm.
I've experienced that to a degree. Anybody else?
I think that the atheists are afraid to come in here, Matt.
There's an actually atheist sitting right next to me here in my office, Kylie, and she's nice.
Yeah, she just showed up for the chat debate thing.
Oh no, we had an appointment, and I forgot about it today. But I apologize for that. But we had an appointment today she's coming over. We're going to talk, and so I think what we're going to do is work on an outline form of the tag argument, and she's going to raise her objections. I'm going to try and articulate something that way because she's smart.
I have a quick two-part question. Are you do you believe in eternal torment in hell or
Yes.
not? Okay. And the second part, does God remove His image from people in hell?
No. No.
Hmm.
That was easy. Next. What you define what the image of God is in Genesis 1:26, a lot of people say what the image is what's called the communicable attributes of God.
Mhm.
They're incommunicable and communicable attributes of God. So non-communicable or the incommunicable, His omnipresence. That omnipresence cannot be communicated to us. In other words, we can't experience omnipresence. His holiness is a quality of His. How about this one? His deity. It cannot be communicated to us. We can't be divine. We can participate in by the indwelling, but we'll get into that. We can, however, God can think, but He thinks perfectly. We can think. God feels, He feels properly, and we feel, not always properly, sometimes improperly. God can be rational. We can be rational, though not always. So the attributes of God that can be communicated to us, though we don't do them perfectly like God does, those are what's called the communicable attributes of God. And it looks like the communicable attributes of God are those things that are the image of God in us. Well, part of that is sentience, self-awareness, contemplation, the ability to love, the ability to hate, the ability to be reasonable. It does not look like those attributes will be forfeited or removed from the person when they're in eternal torment, because it would seem that that would be stripping them of the very identity of what it is that they are, being human. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I would say yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Eternal torment is deserved because we've offended the eternal God. I don't like the idea of eternal torment.
We have our next question. Matt Yester, can you read Amy Farmer's question for us?
The semi-related question?
Yes.
Is it reasonable to say that God is omnipotent? I've come to the conclusion that it's a bit misleading and leads to confusion in discussions, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I can elaborate a little bit further. That I was discussing this with Sean C., y'all know him, and he was saying he doesn't like to use the word omnipotent because it's not possible for God to do things that are contrary to His nature. And a lot of times in discussions with atheists, that'll come up. You know, God isn't actually, He's not all powerful, and that He can't do all things. He can't lie. He can't sin.
Right.
He can't create a rock so big He can't move it. So, and he says he prefers the word almighty, and I've sort of come around to his point of view that using the word omnipotent isn't the best possible word. I've started saying He can't do anything contrary to His nature, but I'm just curious what you think about the term.
That's fine. Theologically, omnipotence, when it relates to God, is defined as God being able to do all things that He's able to do and that He desires to do. Because God would never desire to do anything contrary to His own nature. He'd never desire to be unholy. And so the omnipotence is omnipower. He can do all things He desires to do. I can't do all things I desire to do. I actually desire right now to fly around the city in an envelope of perfectly comfortable air so I can go wherever I want at 300 miles an hour. I can't do that. If God desired to do something like that for Himself, could He do it? Of course. So that's the difference. So when we define it, and you can define, here's the thing, when you say we define it this way, is that okay? Yeah, it works in one sense. If you say He's, I forgot how you said it, what the term was, mighty, powerful, whatever. Well, that's fine. You can use those terms. But then you're forced to explain what you mean by that term. And theologically, omnipotence already has that definition associated with it in biblical circles, in theological circles. It already.
And in theological circles, it's no problem. It's just when discussing with the broader population, atheists and whoever it might be, then you're going to run into the typical trouble of definitions with it.
Yeah, and I regularly come across that, but I still use the proper theological terms. Because if you were to start saying that He's not omnipotent, but now He's almighty, then you might have an atheist say, well, so-and-so said He's not omnipotent, and argue that with somebody else, another Christian. then you have a problem that you'd be creating for somebody else without realizing it. That's why I say
I wouldn't say he's not omnipotent. I just wouldn't use the term. I would say he can't do anything contrary to his nature.
yeah, well, that's what omnipotence is. Just use
Right,
omnipotence and define it that way.
Right, but you're still going to run into people who say it means all-powerful, including logically impossible things.
Okay, so look, okay. The Christian theologians through the centuries have used specific terms for specific reasons. There are advantages of sticking with those terms, because if you're going to train an atheist to understand a certain term a certain way and use a different term, why do that? Why not just stick with the term that the Christian theologians have been using for centuries and train them in what the Christian theological position actually is, instead of reducing the explanatory ability and the terminology to their level? Bring them up, don't lower, unless it's necessary to illustrate something, but always use the true theological thing. This is why I say to Christians, use the term person when referring to the persons of the Godhead. Not personage, not entity, not deity, not beings. There's certain reasons these terms have importance, the same as there's certain reasons the term omnipotence has importance. Because look, omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience, omnisapience, these are terms that the theologians use for a reason. So when I discuss theology with atheists, I want them to know what we teach. If I redefine certain things to make them understand stuff, and I abandon what the historical Christian theologians have used, then I'm undermining the very history of Christianity in its explanatory ability and what it's worked out in the long run to create more problems. Well, I understand what you're saying. Just say, we define omnipotence as him being almighty. He can only do that which he's able to do, and he would never do anything desire to do anything contrary to his nature. Just use the same term, no big deal, and explain it. And if the atheist wants to continue to be obstreperous and say, well, that means he can't make a square circle, he's not omnipotent, is he? And I just say to them, put your right hand in front of your face, look to your left, now slap yourself upside the head. Because they're just being difficult on purpose at that point. Make sense?
Absolutely. Thanks.
I hope that helps. I mean, I've been doing this so long, I'm just saying that I just know where things can lead later on. And you can create a problem you don't need to have later on.
Yeah, I guess a lot of times I try to bring everything down to the very simplest baseline that I possibly can.
Good. Good. Do that. I'm letting the cat out. That's why I'm moving away from the camera. Do that, but also, with that, use the real terms also. You know, just say, well, omnipotence is, et cetera, the almighty, this and that, but just keep using that word so that they understand what we're talking about. Because if we're going to say Trinity, I'm going to say to somebody, well, here's a Trinity, one God and three distinct simultaneous persons. I could break it down and say, well, it's like three parts. Then we have a heresy called partialism associated with that. Well, so I use the word parts. Sometimes I actually use the word parts, but I'm very careful. And I say, this is not the best word to use, but for right now, at the level where we're at, I'm going to say God has three parts, and each of the parts itself is divine. Each of the parts can think. But we call those parts persons. So we have to be careful. If they just start saying, well, Matt Slick said they have parts. You see, I've just done this so many times that I've learned over the years. Stick with the theological terms the best you can. If you can't, well, you can't. Sometimes you can't. But just try to, because it'll help in the long run. That's all. Okay?
And that was Amy Farmer. I'm sorry, Amy. I didn't mean to not ask you to read your own question. I thought you were just putting it in text form and wanted us to read it. So
sometimes she has mic problems, I think. But
No, it wasn't that. I just didn't want to interrupt. Yeah, thanks, Matt.
your mic is a lot clearer than it used to be. Did you get a new one?
Yeah.
Okay, that explains it. Usually a little muffled, but it sounds crystal clear today. Awesome.
Okay, we have Jonathan joining us, and let me add him to the broadcast. Jonathan, how are you? Let me make sure I unmute his microphone. There we go.
He said doesn't have a mic.
Doesn't have a mic. Okay. Jonathan put the question in the comment feed. He says, Matt Slick tells us anything about God. Is he making a judgment about God?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by judgment about God. I'm not judging God, but one judgment can be used in different terms. You know, am I making a judgment about him in that I'm defining what he is? Well, in that sense, yes. I don't judge his actions because I'm not qualified to condemn God. So it depends on what is meant by judgment in what context.
Maybe he'll respond with
I
text.
answered before in text. Well, he asked the same question in text earlier, and I answered it. Where's the difference between judging and explaining, for one thing?
And how does he mean the term judgment? That's why you got to
Right.
say, what do you mean by judging? You know.
Right.
You know, otherwise you get an equivocation. Sometimes atheists, not just atheists, but a lot of people, particularly Muslims, will do this. They'll ask you a question like that, and you'll say, you give something, and then they change how they meant the word. Then they say, see, I caught you. You know.
Well, because a word has different applications. That's the issue. Bingo.
That's right. And if someone says logic is dependent upon language and it's arbitrary, then I win everything you say. Yeah.
Bingo.
Why don't the Christians ever use those arguments? Why don't every time we hear that argument, it's an atheist?
Which argument?
The words have meanings and arbitrary this and that, and
because that's how they can hide. Because what they're trying to do, this is how my view, I believe they're trying to hide because I believe that atheists don't want the truth ultimately. And that what they're trying to do ultimately, a lot of them don't realize it, is they're hiding from God. They're not giving to God the proper due. And so what they're trying to do is explain truth without God. And the only way to do that is by saying, one of the ways to do that is by saying language. Language is a human construct. So they're trying to then again say humanity is the standard of what is morally right or wrong, or truth values that are right or wrong, because we're the ones who define what language is, and since language is a little bit arbitrary, so will our logic then be, depends upon us, so you can't say there's absolutes. It's one of the ways they try and get outside the absolute logic argument. But if that's the case, that it's dependent on us and it's arbitrary to any degree, then blue sleeps faster than Wednesday, no matter what you say, I win. Then they think I'm being obtuse. See, no, I'm just working with the conclusion that you are postulating. You just don't realize it yet. I'm trying to get them to see their absurdity of their position.
Yeah.
But they can't, because they can't do that, because to do that is to refute themselves instantly. And atheists can't abide in that. Nobody can, where you actually argue against yourself in truth. Well, actually, I've done it before. I have. I know I'm mad at my wife. I'm going to say something I know I'm going to regret, and I say it anyway. I've done that. Just plain old stupidity. Then I've had to go eat my words later, knowing I was going to do it. I mean, what a moron. Anyway, I've done it. And so we can be certainly been consistent. And I think atheists, no offense meant, but I think atheists are completely inconsistent in so many things. I'm always consistent about everything I say.
Okay, Jonathan has commented in the chat. He said, I mean, are you making a determination about whether or not something about God is true? I'll also point out that the acceptance of logic is different than having an explanation for why we accept it.
Let's see the first part. I mean, are you making a determination about whether or not something about God is true? Yes, but I want you to understand that I'm not subjecting God to my assertions. What I'm saying is that God has revealed certain things in His Word about Himself. And so therefore, I will recite what God has revealed about Himself and say, this is true. Why? Because God has said so. So I'm not judging God. I'm making a statement about Him. So I'm making a determination about God. God says He is the eternal being. I'm determining He is the eternal being. I'm not determining its validity. I'm determining that God has said this. I don't be careful. I'm just recognizing that what God has said is what He said. I'm not determining whether or not He is who He is. I don't want anybody to get the idea that I'm determining anything about God's character and nature as though I'm sitting in judgment over Him.
Yeah, it has a connotation of saying you're the authority by which.
Right.
Right. See, the words have certain context.
That's right. There's connotation and denotation. Second part, I'll also point out that the acceptance of logic is different than having an explanation for why we accept it. Yes, that's true. Atheists accept logic all the time. They use logic all the time. It's just that they can't explain why it's there. They can't. Let me put it this way: they offer explanations of why the laws of logic are there, but those explanations don't work when you cross-examine them. And I've tried different ways to explain the problems. What they have to do when it comes to the laws of logic is essentially, and there's only a few arguments that they fall under. They essentially have to say that the laws of logic describe behavior in the universe. That's what they say. But they don't realize, and in order to do that, you have to presuppose the laws of logic, because you can't make a statement without the laws of logic being in place for the statement to be made. They don't understand. They're just presupposing the validity of logic to argue for the validity of logic. They're saying the universe acts a certain way, we're describing it. Wait a minute, the description presupposes the laws of logic. Well, no, it doesn't, Matt. Yes, it does. You're saying universe. That's a law of identity. It's presupposing. And the word is, you're presupposing the truth of the law of non-contradiction.
Doesn't the universe itself have properties that change, like water turns to ice?
Yeah, but those are characteristics. But when we talk about properties of the universe, we're talking about measurability of various aspects. The properties emanate out of the ontos, out of the essence of something. Well, it says the laws of logic, they are of the mind, therefore they are conceptual by nature. But the physical universe is not conceptual by nature. What the atheist tries to do is bridge the gap between the conceptual and the physical. They try and impose a conceptual actuality upon a physical actuality. But what they don't realize, they're saying, all I'm doing, Matt, is describing what I'm seeing, and that's a law of logic. No, you're not. You are presupposing the law of logic to describe something. See,
even
but
before
atheists,
that,
see if I can say this. Yeah. They'll say there's a round ball, it's tautology, a sphere, okay, or let's say a rock. There's a rock. They'll say the rock just sits there and is what it is, Matt. That's what we're doing. We're just describing what it is. You really? You're just describing what it is, right? So go get your own logic to do that. Don't borrow from God, because God is the one and the necessary preconditions for the statement to be true in the first place. Something is, a rock is what it is. How do you know a rock is a rock? How do you know it is what it is? How do you know it has an essence? How do you know it has a nature? How are you able to identify what it is? Well, you have to say a rock is a rock. That's what I'm saying. But you're saying the law of logic is true. Then you say the law of logic is true because I'm saying the law of logic is true. But that means it comes from the human mind. But if you say the rock is, I'm just describing what it is, you're not describing anything. You're citing the law of logic and applying it to what you see.
Right.
In order to cite the law of logic, in order to apply it to what you see, the law of logic has to exist in order for it to be applied. That means the law of logic is not the same thing as the thing that's applied to. So a rock is a description of the law of identity. It is what it is. I recognize the truth of what it is. That's how come I can say a rock is a rock. But then they say, see, a rock is a rock. That's how I know the law of identity is true. They reversed it.
Yep. Here's the thing. Ought you say that the thing is that the thing is? that ought is before the describing of what it is. So if they say the laws of logic are descriptive, well, ought we think this way?
Yeah.
They shoot themselves in the foot.
Yeah, then we get into
saying you have to think this way. They're saying, Matt, you have to think this way. You have to think they're only descriptive, not prescriptive. They just shot themselves in the foot.
Right.
Yeah, I ought to think this way. They already put the prescription before the description.
There you go. If a rock is what it is, I like that. They ought to think that. Then there's something that they ought to believe to begin with.
Bingo. Yep.
But why ought they believe it? Because it's true. That means there's an obligation to believe the truth. That means they recognize truth exists outside of themselves.
Yeah, and that's the question is, why ought I think this way? They're only descriptive. Well, and
Wrong.
they put the cart before the horse.
But if you're arbitrary, you ought not to believe anything. You can believe whatever you want. It's all subjective. But the atheist wants to live in an absolute world and offer subjectivity as a counterbalance. What they'll say is, well, morals depend on what you want, or truth is relative to what you want. It only exists in an absolute world where you can be safe saying that, and the universe doesn't collapse in on you.
Well, Matt, I come across more atheists that would rather admit that they don't know if they live in an absolute world.
They're absolutely sure they don't know if they live in an absolute world?
Well, yeah, that's a problem for them, but they're okay with that. They've
Okay.
engaged with the Seitan-Rugenkate presuppositional apologetics so long that they'll just give it to you.
Okay. And I'll say, one of the goals I'll tell atheists I'm trying to do is bring their position to absurdity, to no answers. Now, they can say, but Matt, we can bring you to no answers. Where'd God come from? No answer. God just says he's eternal. That's my answer, but how does that work? I don't know. And then what they try and do is invalidate my argument against them or about them by saying I can't answer about God. But we're talking about the issue of God's existence, not where he came from. I keep coming back to this with atheists.
Well,
The discussion of him being the necessary preconditions is not the same thing as how he became that. Because if he is a necessary precondition, then your atheism is simply false.
Well, kind of shifting the goalpost a little bit, shifting the argument at a certain point to where you're not arguing the same thing you were arguing before.
Right. Shifting the goalpost.
Well, they've already admitted that absolutes don't exist, and how is it contradictory? How is it contradictory, or how can they even examine where God came from?
Well, see, they say absolutes don't exist. They're making an absolute statement. And this is self-refuting.
But you're just playing You're just playing word games. That's what the next point is.
So, well, you can say, are you absolutely sure I'm playing a word game?
Yeah.
You know, this arbitrariness means I win everything. It's, you know, if there's no absolutes, because I've had people say to me, there's no absolutes, Matt. Oh, I'm glad you agree that I win. What? You're an idiot. No. See, you disagree with me again. There's no absolutes and everything is subjective. If everything's subjective, no matter what you say, you're confirming that I'm correct and you're wrong. That's what it leads to.
Can't say you're on a law of logic violation because they don't believe in absolute laws of logic.
Right. It's just absurdity. I've actually had atheists sit here. I've got them to this position, and they'll go, "Well, I don't care anymore." Okay, fine. We're done. We're done with the discussion. You know, I've brought you to your level of absurdity. You can live in the magic fairy universe with absurdities, and you can fall upwards instead of downwards when you go sideways on Tuesdays. That's fine with me. Next. Then they get mad at me. Well, you can't answer me, can you?
Well, their worldview is a time-ticking bomb that's just willing to self-implode at the right moment.
It's right. Imploding. I have a T-shirt that says "Atheism, the ultimate in suicide."
That's pretty spiffy.
It's totally spiffy. It's kind of slick, too. Yeah, okay. I like what you were saying earlier about the issue. We ought to believe in truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's something a lot of atheists don't discuss. Ought we believe what is true?
Well, they're imposing that upon you to say, you got to affirm my position, man. They're only descriptive. Whoa, I go, wait a second, I ought to do this? Wait, where do you get that ought from?
Mm-hmm.
Get that. And they go, I don't know.
An ought implies something non-subjective, but absolute. And if they're going to apply to any oughts that we ought to adhere to truth, how can they do that from an atheistic worldview, which is a bunch of subjective entities walking around, bumping into each other?
And just chemical reactions. There's just
no
right. Truth or ought to the matter. It's just they are.
That's right. That's right. Why ought to believe this or that?
I
right?
chemically fizz that we ought to, and they say we chemically ought to, or chemically ought to say they're descriptive. So, and there really is no argument there. The best thing to say is, well, you with the chemical stimuli you bring in, you say this. When the chemical stimuli reaches their brain, that's what they spit out. That's all you can say about it is you say this, they say that. There's no argument to the matter. Just
Yes, atheist. We could have two atheists having a discussion that's consistent with the idea of the physical realm, the physical brain producing information, just responses to stimulus. Hi, how are you? Blue. My wife, green. Dog. Ground circles. Squirrel. I mean, that's what it leads to. But my brain's going to stimulate, is stimulating, and response is...
Well, how do you, even the previous atheist was on here doing the language, how do you even have cohesiveness over words and syntax used in a sentence?
Right.
Based on that.
That's why I asked.
Yeah, even the original languages, even biblically, where's the original language from?
Yeah, and that's why I ask them, is German logic better than Spanish logic? Because if logic is dependent upon linguistics, then we have different logical systems because the languages have different arguments about how you construct thoughts, which he got earlier, and he recognized that the logic is independent of that.
Right.
So it's not what he said, and it can't be. I mean, it's so easy, sometimes not so easy, to show these guys are inconsistent.
Well, even
for the
worldview, language is just a convention, so there's still the convention absurdity to which
right.
even
logic
they won't appeal to language, or even with Bonson debate Stein said they're just conventions. Didn't really appeal to the language part of it, but it's still the same subset. That's a subset of the convention paradigm. Yeah.
And when Stein said there were conventions, he got his clock clean. Yeah, he lost at that. Yeah, it was over.
That was the self-implosion.
Yeah.
By Stein.
That was one of several.
Well, yeah, that was the start. The collapse.
Language, logic is just a convention. Over.
Of the end. The beginning of the
that's
end.
Right. Yeah, I got this guy hooked. We'll just reel him in and gut him later. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Bonson got him hook, line, and sinker.
That's right. And Stein withdrew from the two other debates that were scheduled. I don't know if you guys know that, but there are two others, and he bailed on it. Okay, what's so-and-so Bryant saying? Oh, Jonathan, try talking about scientists or whatever. What? Science does not make any claims of truth. It only presents good explanations based on the current evidence. That's why, Jonathan, that's why science is a philosophy. It's a philosophy that is used to learn. Because you have to presuppose the validity of logic, presuppose the continuity of nature, presuppose that the scientists are going to tell you their information and results honestly, and then you assume that what you believe may or may not be practical and have value, and that there's certain things that you should adhere to when your theory seems to work, which means it may not be true. So science is a philosophical approach to things. The mistake a lot of atheists make is some of them will say to me, I will only believe something proved by the scientific method. Okay, then have you proved the scientific method is true? By the scientific method? But remember, if you do that, you can't commit the fallacy of begging the question. If you can only believe that which you can prove by the scientific method, then have you proved it true by using the scientific method? And they of course, say no. So they're self-refuting.
That's where empiricism implodes.
Well, science is based on the same axioms that Christians already accept. Yes, it's true. But the only reason science can work is because of the uniformity of nature. And I think it was Immanuel Kant who destroyed the idea of the theory of induction. You should read up on that. We can get into that another time because we're running low on time here. But the axioms that we hold to, for example, the laws of logic and the continuity of nature, have best explanations in a Christian worldview, not in an atheistic one. Because an atheist, if he's going to observe something around him, that every time he drops the rock on his foot, it hurts, does it mean that every time he drops a rock on anybody's foot anywhere, it always hurts? But he can only go, that's called induction. By the small event, he concludes a major truth. But he doesn't know if the same condition will produce the same result everywhere all the time. He has to conclude it. And there's no reason to say that his conclusion is true. But with God, we can trust in the predictability of the universe because he created it and it reflects his character. This is how science got its start in Western civilization, because magic and folklore and other things were believed to be true. It was a science. It was the Christians who believed in the repeatability and predictability of nature, its regularity, based upon the principle that it was created out of the character of God, and that reflection of God's character would be found in nature. That developed, and that was the foundation that science developed out of. That's where it came from. And now science is used to turn against its own master.
Yeah. Also add David Hume and Bertrand Russell to that. They both undermined scientific validity, or at least validity of the scientific method, which is based on induction, because even Russell said past experience cannot lay a rational foundation for future expectation. All you can say is, up to now, this has been the case, but that has no relevance to the future at all.
But what they do is they extrapolate and say, because it's been consistent in the past, it will be in the future, but that's a faith statement.
Well, it's a category error, too, because the past is not the same as the future.
Yep.
Not.
But their experience, because particularly for the empiricists, they have problems. And the rationalists do too. But the empiricists are going to just say, well, my experience has taught me this. Well, hey, really? Hi, Mr. Subjectivity.
Well, that's the thing. Past experience cannot lay an absolute for any universals, so universals are out of the question.
Right.
I say it applies at all times and all places for anything whatsoever, so that self-implodes. And you can just say, up till this point, that's just it. It's a probabilistic statement, but that's just all it is. They can't say anything definite.
It also shoots them in the foot when it comes to the issue of the transcendental logic laws, because if they're going to say that the laws of logic have worked up to now, we don't know if they're going to work in the future, then there might be a time in the future, potentially, where the laws of logic are no longer valid. And then blue sleeps faster than Wednesday.
Okay, it is that time again where I need to end the hangout. I was just looking at some of the comments from last week's engagement between Matt Slick and Scott Clifton, and I've been accused, Matt, of using multiple sock accounts to make comments that are that were positive comments towards you.
Really?
Yeah. Well.
Did you?
No.
Okay.
No, I
haven't
didn't.
Looked at any of it. I haven't read any of the comments.
So perhaps someday we'll have Scott on again. That would be excellent.
Sure.
Maybe go in another direction other than morality. It's late. I need to go. I'd like to talk about it though, but that's all right. So thanks everybody who joined us. Thanks for everybody who's listened. And Matt, special thanks to you for joining us each week. And anybody wants to know more about Matt Slick, go to carm.org. And once again, you guys have been listening to a Google Hangout on the Biblethumpingwingnut.com YouTube channel. And that's all we have for you today. Take care. Thanks for listening.
All right. God bless.
And philosophical vlogs and joins right at the end. Maybe next week. Philosophical vlogs will engage with you, Matt. Always a good discussion with him.
Okay.
Goodbye,
good.
everybody.
Okay.